rumors are swirling about Pope Leo XIV while he's on vacation at Castell Gondolfo.
The appointments are going to be quite crucial because they're going to portray for the rest of the church the style in which he wants to govern and the aspects which he's going to prioritize. Because personnel really is going to be policy, especially dealing with the legacy of Pope Francis. When you have such great moral confusion which has continued for many years, documents like Fiducia Supplicans have caused so much confusion and have been so widely picked up on by the secular world that you need to have a very clear, a very direct promulgation of some clarification of Catholic teaching.
Cardinal Fernandez basically said nothing's going to change in Fiducia Supplicans, which, I mean, my eyebrows were raised.
By the way, my name is Joe McLean. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
There's a great article over at primarium.com. I'll put a link to it in the show notes today. Michael Haynes, the author of it, joins us today from LifeSite News. Praise be to God. Good morning to you, Michael. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Joe. Good to be with you.
There's a lot of speculation with Pope Leo going back to Castell Gondolfo, which we all think is a beautiful thing. He's got an encyclical to write. I don't know how he's going to get that squeezed in the middle of the night, but he's somehow, some way. And then, of course, we're hearing rumors that he is discerning big replacements in the Curia. And there's a lot to discuss. Your article talks about some of the big issues that a lot of people have been talking about need to happen. What say you? What do you anticipate will actually come from the vacation at Castell Gondolfo?
Well, I think possibly the earliest thing might be some appointments. We saw that the Pope told all the heads and the secretaries of the Vatican Curia to remain in place, at least until they heard further from him. And I think, especially given when he arrived at the papacy in May, this summer period is always going to be quite key for him, so he can take that time to go back and revisit the appointments. But really, the appointments are going to be quite crucial because they're going to portray for the rest of the church the style in which he wants to govern and the aspects which he's going to prioritize. Because personnel really is going to be policy, especially dealing with the legacy of Pope Francis. When you have such great moral confusion which has continued for many years, a number of the Vatican prefects are going to be quite closely linked to those issues, thinking of, for instance, Cardinal Fernandez and issues like Fiducia Supplicans. If Pope Leo decides to extend Cardinal Fernandez's stay in Rome, that's going to send a very clear signal about what issues he is concerned about or not. So I think that's possibly going to be the earliest fruit of this summer vacation. And then, as you say, there's talk now of an encyclical coming. Now, Nico Spontoni, who's a great Italian journalist, he noted that it's possible this rumored encyclical is building on themes or even maybe a somewhat prepared text that was prepared under Pope Francis's time for Pope Francis, not by Cardinal Prevost, but during the last pontificate. And that it might be on the theme of the poor, which is something very close to Pope Francis's heart in terms of the aspects he prioritized, but it's also something which Leo might be, I think, reasonably expected to prioritize, especially given his allusion to the priorities of Leo XIII and the Catholic social teaching in these days now. But really, that remains to be seen. You know, what might be the theme be of some large text emerging from this vacation.
Wasn't it, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it the first encyclical Francis put out was something that was written under Benedict's papacy?
That's right. And it's not, it's fairly normal, I think, for the popes to try and push out their first major text fairly soon after their papacy, because in a sense, just like the appointments, it's also a very good way to gauge the issues that they're going to prioritize and the message that they want to send, not only to the church, but to the wider secular world. I think especially with Pope Leo looking in good physical health, arriving to the papacy at 69 years old, his pontificate could well be expected to be a long one. So he's going to want to think quite carefully about what message and what themes he's promoting very early on in his reign.
Just the other day, we read that Cardinal Fernandez basically said nothing's going to change in fiducia supplicans, which, I mean, my eyebrows were raised with that. Where that's something that you talk about in the article, that a number of people, Bishop Schneider, Father Murray, and others have all said these are the things that they need to change. These are the things that need to be addressed. Is there any hope that he's actually going to address those? Do we think that he will, in fact, address those issues, or will things quietly just move forward?
As yet, I've not heard any particular sort of rumors or suggestions from Vatican side as one way or the other. In fact, the people I've spoken to most recently are still quite cautious about how the pontificate might play out. But I think we can glean some ideas from Leo's style. He's very much a calmer pope, at least so far, when we put him in contrast with Pope Francis, who was much more individual, if you like. He certainly had his own way with dealing with the media, with dealing with his every papal audience. And so if Leo is going to handle issues like fiducia supplicans, he's possibly not going to revoke it immediately. Maybe he's going to try and look for a calmer method. However, I personally think that such a sort of a diplomatic response, if you like, is not actually the best thing for the church, because documents like fiducia supplicans have caused so much confusion and have been so widely picked up on by the secular world that you need to have a very clear, a very direct promulgation of some clarification of Catholic teaching from Pope Leo now, because anything that's too subtle is not going to be picked up on by the secular press, because the secular press is especially looking for the juicy headlines, if you like, from the Catholic world.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I just think it continues to add confusion and chaos to the body of Christ, and clarity is charity in that regard. But something else you talk about in your Primarium article is Cardinal Zen approach to this. You know, there's a lot of us, myself being in this list of people who've been highly critical of not only Francis' pontificate, but have been wanting like quick and decisive action in the Leo pontificate now. Cardinal Zen has an interesting approach to this. Can you take us through that?
He does, and I think he approaches it with the understanding that you'd expect from him as a cardinal, and just being that bit familiar with the way the Vatican works. So he's cautioned against trying to rush the Pope or even to overanalyze his every move. He says let's continue to pray for the Pope without rushing or putting pressure on him, without creating fake news, and without overanalyzing his every action or word. And I think this ties in a little bit to what I mentioned about the possibility of quite a long pontificate. Pope Leo is going to want to be cautious, I think, in his first steps initially, because he's going to be looking around him to see who are the people he can count on, and also who are those who he should be a little bit more wary of, particularly those who are continuing in positions left over from Pope Francis. But also, I think that the Vatican doesn't quite work as swiftly as most of us would perhaps like. There's certainly the Italian style of action in it. And Cardinal Zen is, I think, aware of that. But at the same time, we've seen Cardinal Zen not be afraid at all to raise these issues, to urge the Pope to clarify things. He mentions fiducia supplicans by name in this letter, and he's been very vocal about these throughout the pontificate of Pope Francis. He's been very vocal about the crisis of confusion caused by the Synod. He spoke at the conclave and said that the way forward for the Synod is really a matter of life and death for the Church. So there's a mixture, I think, a happy medium of not rushing on some things, but at the same time not compromising on the integrity of the faith.
Yeah, not compromising. So it's a little bit of both there. Very interesting. Which, today we're learning that the Synod on Synodality has now postponed some of its reports on some of those, study groups, women deacons, things like that. Why do you think they did that? Why are they postponing?
That's right. So they sent out a newsletter from the Synod Secretariat just last Monday, I believe, and they mentioned in that short letter that it was chiefly due to the upheaval in timescale and working patterns caused by Pope Francis's illness, and then by his funeral and the conclave. So they have until December the 31st to submit their reports, which to my mind wasn't unexpected given all the upheaval of the recent months. But we've also seen that Pope Leo, which was announced just yesterday, I believe, Pope Leo has appointed 2 new study groups to add to the 10 which were already instituted by Pope Francis. And one of those is quite interesting to me because it's studying the liturgy in terms of synodality. And that was a point which was raised in the final document which emerged from the Synod last October. And it's quite interesting that the Pope has decided to highlight this because previously his message on the liturgy had been quite encouraging for those keen to have a return for reverence in the liturgy. So I think this is going to be one to watch particularly. And of course, the more controversial ones, like the study group on female deacons, are still in progress, and they're expected to report at the latest by the end of this year.
With the big news last week, the bombshell from Dine Montagna about the leaked results from the 2020 survey on the traditional Latin Mass and Summorum Pontificum, and it turns out the opposite was true. We were told that it was those results were what was the impetus for Pope Francis to issue Traditionis Custodes, but the opposite was true. The world seemed to be perfectly okay with Summorum Pontificum. Do you think that's going to play a role in anything we're going to see when he gets back from Castell Gondolfo?
I would certainly hope so, and I think I'd be joined in that by many others. And we've seen a number of high-ranking prelates also make their voices known in that regard. Cardinal Burke, a couple of weeks ago at the Latin Mass Society conference, did mention that he's had the opportunity to speak to the Pope on this issue. And Cardinal Burke, with his steady analysis of the canon law, of the Church's liturgy, I'm sure was able to give good advice. Let's hope that he's in a position to be able to be granted access to the Pope to be able to continue that advice, because I think with many of these issues, the traditional Mass, the confusion about fiducia supplicans or amoris laetitia, it's going to be a key that the Pope's reaction is going to be quite dependent on who he has around him, who's advising him, and what actions he's being encouraged and supported to take. But I think for the sake of the Church, for the sake of the souls who are being devastated by Pope Francis's restrictions, that there certainly needs to be very urgent action to return to normality, to return to the free permission of this beautiful rite.
Amen. It seems to me, we're going to run out of time here really quickly, but it seems to me that the Pope returning to Castel Gandolfo is a big deal for the local people there. They seem to be very happy about it.
Absolutely. It's a return to normality, I think, for them, but also there was an unspoken or an unhighlighted aspect about how Pope Francis's absence was actually a financial hit for them. So this is a good thing for them in terms of the return of tourism and the return of the many quasi-pilgrims, if you like, coming to see where the Pope is staying during his summer vacation.
And he says Mass at the local churches, which is kind of cool. If you showed up to your Mass on Sunday and the Pope just happened to be celebrating the Mass, that'd be kind of a cool deal, I would argue.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.